Hello, I am super excited to share a special announcement with you, and that is right now, April 2026 is in fact the 10-year anniversary, the 10-year birthday, if you will, of the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast. And so we're going to do something kind of special with that. I am going to highlight one super special episode and represent it here, interspersed amongst the new episodes over the course of the next few weeks and months, so we can hear a super special episode. And these are episodes that have continued to perennially perform well in the analytics. Lots of starts, lots of people re-listening to it for multiple times, which you can see in the stats, which is kind of cool, as well as I found personally memorable and impactful for my own life, work, career stuff. So it's a lot of fun, and I hope you really dig some of these super greatest hits. And we're going to start way back in October 2016, episode 69, Winning Arguments While Winning Allies with Jay Heinrichs. Jay was so much fun. We had a lot of laughs and we had a lot of insights and a lot of actionable goodness. And it's fun just to go into the time capsule to hear about polarization in politics in 2016. And boy, I think we're still hearing some of that, and where arguments are going well, what to do if you find yourself upsetting someone, how to apologize properly, disentangle some tricky situations, keep the right goals in mind. So much good stuff. So without further ado, I will represent in its entirety, including the old school version 1 jingle of How to Be Awesome at Your Job music, our episode 69, Winning Arguments While Winning Allies with Jay Heinrichs.
Welcome to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, the show where brilliant professionals share how to sharpen the universal skills required to flourish at work. Enjoy more career fun, wins, meaning, and money with your host, Pete Makaitis.
Here's a quick bit about Jay. Jay Heinrichs is the author of the best-selling book, Thank You for Arguing, What Aristotle, Lincoln, and Homer Simpson Can Teach Us About the Art of Persuasion. His most recent book, Word Hero, teaches how to craft memorable content. Combining tested tools of classical rhetoric with modern neuroscience, he's given presentations, workshops, and consults around the world. With more than 30 years in publishing as a writer, editor, and executive, Jay has written for several dozen publications, from the New York Times Magazine to Reader's Digest. Here's Jay. Jay, thanks so much for being here on the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast.
It's a pleasure, Pete.
Well, I think congratulations are in order. Isn't it not true that just recently your revised edition of Thank You for Arguing hit the coveted New York Times bestseller list?
Yes, it did.
Booyah. Congratulations.
Thanks.
So tell me, this book, Thank You for Arguing, is used in many different contexts. And so I want to hear the most sort of what you think would be the most sort of juicy, interesting, useful, themes and tips that apply to a young professional working in a corporate environment.
Well, the book has more than 100 tools or persuasion techniques that you can go off of. But you know what? I'll tell you, the reason I wrote it was to show people how to think rhetorically. And by that, I mean how to think like a rhetorician. So rhetoric isn't taught that much anymore. You were lucky to get a class. It is growing fast now in high schools and colleges, but it's the original art of leadership. Everybody used to study it. Alexander the Great studied it with Aristotle. Julius Caesar, William Shakespeare, every one of the American founders studied rhetoric. So why should corporate professional learn to think rhetorically? Well, because it teaches you, it taught me how to write and think persuasively, how to understand audiences and markets better, and how to produce something to say on every occasion and have people like you when you say something. So, for example, here's a juicy bit. When someone gets angry with you, watch what tense you're in, whether you're in the past tense, the future tense, or the present tense. Now, you'll find that an angry person will almost always speak in the past or present tense. You did this horrible thing in the past, or you're a real jerk in the present. So one way to take the anger out is to switch to the future. Let's talk about how we're going to fix this. Let's find a solution. Let's not describe what kind of person I am or what sort of atrocity I committed.
Well, that is fascinating. And so you sort of see that time and time again, is that angry people tend to focus on those tenses as opposed to, this is going to ruin everything, future tense catastrophizing.
Well, this is going to ruin everything is actually kind of an opening. At least it does shift into the future, which is where choices make a difference. And by argument, I'm really talking about deliberative argument, which is a particular kind of argument. And that's an argument about choices, about how you're going to influence the future. So talking about what a jerk I am, it's really doing nothing for the future. I'm going to be a jerk forever.
Right.
If you're talking about what I did in the past, well, the only way we're going to affect the future is to talk about how I'm going to fix what I did. And we're back in the future again. So when you say what I'm talking about is going to ruin everything, then I can say, all right, let's talk about how not only not to ruin everything, but how to make a better future.
That's so good. And so you're saying the wrong answer then in that circumstance is to sort of argue or fight over, well, I didn't know, or it's someone else's fault for not giving me the data. Like that's just going to keep you in a bad spot.
Exactly. One of the things that I say in the book is the first thing to do when you find yourself in a disagreement is to set your goal. What do you want? What do you want out of this thing? Now, if you happen to be in a committed relationship, like a marriage, maybe your goal ought to be to stay married.
Okay.
Instead of like maybe try not to win, just stay married. On the other hand, in a business setting, you want to maintain a good relationship with your colleagues. So that's an important goal. Or you might think maybe the audience I'm really speaking to is not the person who's disagreeing with me, but other people who are listening in. How do I impress them? How do I persuade them to take my choice instead of this other person's? And that's a goal. So you set that goal and then you work toward that goal. You don't simply push back against what the other person said.
Okay. Well, that is right off the gate. These are some handy tidbits. Any others leaping to mind for you, or should I do my job as an interviewer?
I don't want to blow my wad, Pete. I got 120 of these. We can go through all of them.
Oh, that's good. Well, we got to leave a little something for the book, and so we will. So, well, I want to maybe just zoom out a little bit because I was chatting with my fiance, so I'll keep some of those lessons associated with arguing well in mind in terms of the goal and the relationship maintenance. So we were just talking about, my goodness, it seems like in the United States these days and in politics in particular, things really are an extra dose of polarizing, close-minded, partisan. It's just like folks tend to just sort of believe what they want to believe. And well, it's just not a rosy situation. I just think it's miles and miles away from like the Lincoln Douglas debates, which just numerous sessions, numerous lengths of time, uncomfortable settings, traveling out there to really hear, think, and reason about, which one of these guys would be the best for us? So could you maybe give us a bit of a historical or commentary on how did we get here and what's our cause for hope for the United States people to get back to thinking and having some rhetoric and thank you for arguing type exchanges?
Yeah. Okay. So politics. These days, there have been obviously some major changes in politics. Now, you talk about the Lincoln Douglas debates. Now, obviously, that was the greatest hit of politics. There was a lot of nasty stuff going on in politics when Lincoln and Douglas weren't on the stage. So we're seeing the best of the best. And so it's a little too easy to get nostalgic about it. That being said, one big difference is that in politics, there's a big problem that's going on. And it doesn't really have to do with what we believe in or what we don't believe in. The fact is that politicians have little reason anymore to persuade. They don't have to. Most members of Congress are in safe, gerrymandered districts where they're guaranteed their job, right? Their own supporters are already the people living all around them. Now, they spend most of their time raising money instead of persuading votes. So they're persuading donors. There's a lot of really good persuasion going on with rich people, not with voters. Now, even at the presidential level, it's all about turnout, not so much the undecided voter. And the reason is there are very few undecided voters in the country. It's between 4 and 8%, depending on the election. Now, at all levels, what's happening is political operatives and consultants work communication and marketing content strategies at the micro level, at the micro audience level, targeting these tiny groups and saying what they want to hear. So it's really not what the politicians are saying. And actually, speeches do very little. Advertising, lots of studies show that television advertising does very little. What's really going on is on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter. This is where the persuasion is going on. And it's awful persuasion because it's very tiny groups. So there's very little opportunity for groups to hear anything that they don't believe in. And I think that's where you get some of this consolidation in belief. So Lincoln and Douglas, as you pointed out, they spoke knowing their audience. They were looking at them. But, their larger audience wasn't there when they were speaking. Here's another big factor. Their audience mostly were readers. Lincoln and Douglas knew that their debates were going to be published in written form. Lincoln knew that when he gave a speech, it would be published and everybody would read it. He grew up reading two things as a kid, as a boy. One was the speeches of Daniel Webster, who was the greatest orator of his time, United States Senator, Secretary of State, brilliant lawyer, great politician. Daniel Webster was Lincoln's education. And Webster would give these speeches and then he would edit them. And they were the bestsellers of their day. Everybody read Daniel Webster, no matter what they believed in. So this was a nation of readers. We're not anymore. We now look at YouTube in 12-second bites. If you can get anybody to watch a YouTube video that doesn't involve a cute animal and watch it for more than 12 seconds, you've pulled off a miracle.
Okay.
And so as a result, people are talking in sound bites that look ridiculous in print. Look at Donald Trump, very successful in his talks. He speaks in these 12-second bursts. And I hope we can get back to that because that's really a great technique for people, by the way, in presentations. But they look terrible when you read them. They're great if you see them in a speech, especially if you're in a crowd. So what's the answer to all this? I think the answer lies in educating young people in the ways that these content agencies and political consultants manipulate us. I think the fact is that rhetoric really does need to be studied more so that people can see how this manipulation goes on. It also makes people eager to hear the other side, if only to engage in it in interesting ways.
Oh, that's great. So, well, I do want to make sure we kind of revisit the 12-second bursts and more. So maybe we talk about revisiting this. I think some people just maybe don't even have a taste for it. They say, arguing, that feels like conflict. That feels uncomfortable in my gut and on the back of my neck. How should we think about arguing or rhetoric in an affirming light?
Well, that's a great question. And I think it comes down to the fact that people tend to confuse an argument with a fight, as if an argument and a fight are the same thing. So in a fight, your purpose is to win. Your goal is to win the fight, right? To get the other side to admit defeat. You're going to dominate the other person and win.
All right.
In an argument, on the other hand, you try to win over the other person to make them feel as if they won while you get what you want. So in the book, I give this example of this disagreement I had with my son, George. This was some years ago. He's all grown up now. At the time, he was a teenager. And I was in the bathroom first thing in the morning, and I went to brush my teeth, and I discovered that the toothpaste tube had all been squeezed dry. And being the father of a teenage son, I knew who the likely culprit was. So I yelled through the closed bathroom door saying, "George, who used up all the toothpaste?" And I hear this sarcastic voice coming from the other side saying, "That's not the point, is it, Dad?" The point is, how are we going to keep this from happening again? Now, he had grown up hearing me talk about these rhetorical techniques, including switching to the future when you yourself get in trouble. And the thing is, I was so pleased that he had actually been listening all that time, that I had no idea he'd been paying attention, that I actually decided to let him win. So I had okay, George, you win. Now, will you please get me some toothpaste? And you know what? He went down into our freezing basement. We live in New Hampshire. It was midwinter. And he got me a tube of toothpaste. So, in the book, I say, actually, George, I think I won that argument. He was very pleased that I had let him win the disagreement, but I got a teenage boy to run an errand happily for me.
Okay.
That is a true triumph for persuasion, as any parent will tell you. So, and I think that summarizes the difference between a fight and an argument. I started out feeling a little angry at this jerk for squeezing up this tube of toothpaste. And I ended up with a tube of toothpaste, refreshed, with everybody happy. That's an argument. That's not a fight.
Oh, that's so fun. So a world of difference between winning, like dominating, versus winning them over and sort of getting your outcome, the sort of goal you established at the beginning, achieved. So can you share some, I guess, key principles and tactics that contribute to arriving at that outcome more often?
Well, I mentioned probably the very first thing. I mean, there are some steps that you should do habitually. And one is to set your goal. We talked about that. So there are several goals in persuasion. One is thinking about what you want to change with this disagreement. So the easiest thing to change is the mood. You can use a little bit of humor as long as it doesn't look like you're making fun of the other person, and that will lighten the mood. Okay. So harder than that is to change someone's mind, what their opinion is about something. And, George actually was using a technique when he said that's not the point. One great technique to change somebody's mind is to reframe the issue. And one way to do that is to say, what's this really about? By the way, it's a great way to throw people off their balance if you care to do that. If you really want to manipulate a person, you could say, is this really about toothpaste? Or is it about something deeper, And by the way, I say this to high school kids all the time. If you're really mad at your sibling and your sibling just comes at you for something, you could say, what's this really about? Are you okay? Does this have to do with that lame boyfriend of yours? Anyway, so in a business setting, of course, you don't want to be quite so obnoxious. You can say, let's talk about the larger issues here. And then what you're doing is you're reframing an issue by broadening it. And you could change people's minds that way to say, all right, this issue really isn't about the fact that we didn't make our numbers last quarter. What this is really about is the fact that our audience is aging out of our product. So this issue is really about whether we need to update our product, not whether we didn't make our numbers last quarter.
Okay.
So you're reframing the issue. That's another thing to do. And then finally, the hardest thing to do is to get someone to take an action. So you see this in elections all the time with young people. You could get them to go to the big Bernie get-togethers and, get them all to cheer Bernie Sanders. Getting them actually show up at the polls is much, much harder. And so you can change somebody's mood. You can get them in the mood for something. You can change their minds, which is harder. Getting them actually to take action is the hardest of all. And that takes different steps. And I don't want to lead you through all the steps of argument, but I can leave you with this one thing. To get someone to be willing to take an action, they have to really desire the goal. That's the first thing. Right. So if you look at diet books, they are really good at getting people to take the action of buying a diet book. So you give them desire, which is lose weight, right? Especially lose weight rapidly, a ton of weight in no time.
And eat what you like.
Well, that's part two. And that is to make it seem really easy. So eat what you like, the banana split diet, eat 20 scoops of ice cream a day and nothing else, and you will lose weight, probably in horrible ways. So in other words, and this is, by the way, I got this straight from the philosopher Aristotle. So the Greeks were selling each other stuff long before we Americans were doing it. And so to get action, build desire for the goal, and then make the goal itself, achieving it, seem really easy. And one way to do that, by the way, is to chunk it, divide the action you want into tiny little steps. So you can say, I'm not asking you to go to the polls right now. Instead, I'm asking you to go to this website. Just one step at a time. When you go to the website, then all you have to do is click on this link. When you click on the link, put in your email address. And after you do that, and so on. And gradually, little by little, you find yourself leading this trail up to the polling booth and voting for the candidate or buying a product for that matter.
And so the advice there is to see if you could make it as absolutely tiny and hard to say no to as possible.
Exactly. You've got to keep that desire in front of them all the time. Don't ever forget that. So, in the content marketing world, they talk about the consumer journey, which is the path the consumer takes from first becoming aware of your brand to finally becoming a big champion of the brand and recommending it to all her friends and so on. But the biggest mistake that content marketers make along that journey, it's a series of tiny little steps they lead the consumer along, is actually to make sure that desire is still there, that they really fully understand that this product is amazing, it's going to make them really cool, that it's going to change their lives in all the right ways, and that it costs them practically nothing.
Okay. Wow, that's good stuff. So much. Well, I want to ask all sorts of follow-ups, but why don't we hit the quick one in a 12-second burst, maybe? What's the benefit of the 12-second burst and the magic behind that number?
Well, unfortunately, I always talk in more than 12 seconds, not being a speechmaker. But all right, I have to get really nerdy on you, but I'll
do it
quickly. The ancient Greeks believed that the patterns of the brain worked in concert with the patterns of the rest of the body. So, for example, they believed that a single sustainable thought, an idea, an impression, lasted as long as a single long human breath, an orator's breath. I tested this theory. They called it, by the way, the period. Now, the period is where we get the idea of the punctuation mark at the end of a sentence. A sentence is the end of a thought, right? So, okay. So a period to a Greek, it was actually what they would say in the length of a human breath that would be really memorable. And it was usually the climax of a speech. So to test whether the Greeks really knew what they were talking about and whether this still held true, I went on YouTube and I looked up all the movie speeches I could. And I looked for when the music started to well up, which was, a signal in Hollywood terms of the climax of the speech. And guess what? From the moment the music wells up until the end, I did a video on this that highlights Mel Gibson.
Braveheart.
In Braveheart, yeah. And what you'll find is that they last 12 seconds, which is exactly the length of a well-sustained human breath. 12 seconds long. So Donald Trump does, let's look at Hillary Clinton. She will climax her speeches in 12 seconds. And she'll do it once. That's the climax of the speech. You don't get the music, but you can tell that's the climax. Okay. Donald Trump does something very different. He borrows from stand-up comedians who speak in 12-second sort of non sequiturs, unrelated passages. They'll tell a joke about why your socks lost in the dryer. And then they'll switch about their wife's latest diet. One thing unrelated to the other. They just talk. And what you'll find is that the most effective comedians will speak in these 12-second bursts. And that's what Donald Trump does. It's like he's telling jokes, only he's not. He's talking about building walls. He'll get up on stage and he'll talk for 12 seconds, and then he'll stop. So it's pretty cool stuff. These Greeks knew what they were doing.
I'm thinking if I want to leverage that knowledge for maximum impact, I should be sort of thinking in particular, like, where am I going to drop something that is about 12 seconds with oomph? Is that kind of how I should think about implementing this?
So what Marcus Tullius Cicero teaches is a sort of a series of steps you take when you're writing a speech. So he tells you how to outline a speech, and it still works today. I mean, I coach clients in giving TED Talks. And so one of the things I do is I teach them the art of invention, or inventio in Latin, which is basically about discovery as well as creation. And so if you look at ways for you to figure out how do you build to a climax in a speech? One way to do that is to discover what your speech's climax is. Yeah, so you know the topic, you know what you want to say, you know what you want to get out of it, and most importantly, you know your audience, you know what they believe and expect, okay? So you think, what would be the big thing that just gets everybody to their feet? All right? So you think about that. That's what you think about before anything else. You don't begin to write your speech. You think about that climax of your speech. So you start with a period. That's what I would tell people. This is not your elevator speech or anything like that. It's only 12 seconds. Summarize what you want to say and then do it in like rewrite it. If you've rewritten it 30 times, it's probably not enough. I mean, that's what you really got to work on. That's what's going to be what people are going to remember, and they're going to share it. That's what goes viral. Okay. So you do that, and then the rest of your TED Talk kind of follows. You just follow Civero's outline for an oration and then take it from there, and you're done. You're famous.
Wow. That's so cool. So I guess I'm thinking now, all right. So Donald Trump just keeps doing it, and the best comedians kind of just do it again and again and again and again, these 12-second bits. Whereas you're saying if you're delivering a talk, an oration, you want to have a kind of one super money climax period established and build the rest around that.
Yeah, because you have to have content.
Yes.
Unlike a comedian or Donald Trump at a rally, you actually have to say something.
Okay.
Now, I guarantee you that Donald Trump does not use that technique when he's really making a deal. Okay. He's not going in and saying, this will be the best building ever. This will be the greatest building. It'll be beautiful. You know, he's not saying that. He's saying, here's how the leasing will work. Here's how my branding for this building works. Here's what the material will be made of. Here's how I'm going to subcontract it, right? There's content to what he's going to say. He knows when he's talking to a crowd of people who just want to be entertained and worked up, he's going to just keep them entertained. But remember, he learned how to do this on reality TV.
Right.
Where it's a content-free environment, and that's what he's exercising right now. You and I actually have to say something, as does Donald Trump when he's not up there on the stage.
Okay.
And that's why you have to start with, think about what it is you want to get out of this speech, and then build the content around that climax.
And so I guess I'm wondering if you are delivering even maybe more of a mundane kind of a situation, like here is how the radio frequency network performed over the last month. Does this apply there in terms of like there is a climax and a 12-second period to be focused on within there? Or maybe this is just not quite an appropriate fit in certain spots?
Well, I think that that's a good point. I mean, there are times when you don't want an emotional peroration, as the term is. Mm-hmm. There's a degree to which you get poetic, and there's a degree to which you won't. And by the way, sometimes your peroration can just be really plain speech, and people might not even know that it's the climax, but it's memorable nonetheless. People will walk away repeating what you said, and that's your ultimate goal. You want what you say to go viral. Even if it's among 6 people in a conference room, you want them walking away repeating what you said. Now, getting back to politics, the Republicans are much better at this than Democrats. Democrats are all trying still to sound like John F. Kennedy with his like beautifully written speeches. People love Obama's speeches when he's really trying because they can be very eloquent and you could read them afterwards. They still read great. But on the other hand, Republicans do something much more tricky and rhetorically useful, which is that they speak in terms of tropes, which change people's views of reality, but still sound very plain spoken. So, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds about tropes, but tropes basically, you know what a metaphor is. If I say the moon is a balloon, you're not going to call me a liar.
Right.
You know, I'm just kind of being poetic, right? Yeah. But I'm making you think about the moon a little bit differently. I'm sort of changing the reality just a little bit. Well, there are tropes that people don't understand because they weren't educated in them that Republicans use all the time, which is, you know, if you look at Ronald Reagan talking about the welfare mother, that's a trope. There's no welfare mother. I mean, there were probably a bunch of mothers on welfare, but not in the way he described this person who was having children just to make money from the government. That never happened. But what he was doing, and really achieved a lot doing this, is they made people to change people's views of what people on welfare were like. They weren't people who needed help. They were people who were exploiting the system. That's a really tricky trope. It's even got a tricky name. It's called synecdoche. It's a way of summarizing a whole group of people in one individual who may be real or not. And the Republicans are much better at that than Democrats are.
Ooh, that's so fascinating. And now to that point about being viral or the period being a climax that really gets attention, I've noticed as I am at different conferences and such, I like to pay attention to what people tweet from a keynoter. And I seem to often notice that it's kind of a distinction. And you talked about, JFK, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you could do for your country. Or they'll say, maybe someone's talking about fraternities and sororities, and they'll say, a friend will tell you what you want to hear, but a brother will tell you what you need to hear. It often follows that kind of quotable distinction. Any comments on that or other elements that often correspond with that 12-second climax period?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. What the Democrats tend to do instead of tropes is they speak in terms of figures or figures of speech. And those are unusual or poetic patterns of language or unusual use of words. So when you refer to John F. Kennedy, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. He's actually employing my favorite figure of all time, the chiasmus. I call it the crisscross figure. So it takes a phrase or a clause and then it flips it. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you do for your country. It's turning it around. It's a beautiful and memorable, and that if Twitter existed at the time, it would have gone, totally viral right away. It would have been like with little posters with a lion on it or something, So the reason for that is that kind of unusual language, people will at first be a little confused by it, as with any kind of poetry, and then they'll repeat it in their heads and it becomes imprinted that way. And then they feel cool when they repeat it. So that's great. The only thing is that it's really out there. You know what the person is intending. You know how they're trying to persuade you. And that's not the most effective form of rhetoric. So sometimes when things do get retweeted and go viral, that's great. I mean, I personally love it when I give talks and, I see on Twitter, the stuff I've said gets tweeted verbatim. And it's great for my ego, but it often isn't the most important thing I'm actually trying to say. It's often, that's the stuff where I'm just entertaining them. I did just the other day. I was speaking to a group of students over Skype at a school, and I said, young people are never going to change things until they start shifting their focus to the future. That's hardly something you'd want to needlepoint on a pillow. And yet, it's like at least 5 people tweeted it simultaneously, and that guy retweeted it and it went all over the place. And it's like, it's funny because I hadn't even tried to express that as something memorable, but it occurred to me in retrospect that actually word future is a trope. You're making people think differently about reality. You think about this, a teenage kid is always told about the future, but they never really think about the future, about their failure to look at it as something as if it already exists. So I think that was what made the difference. And I heard back from people saying, oh my God, you changed my life. How teenagers will do that.
Well, there's so many things I'd like to chat through, but I'll focus in a smidge. So you have a nice section in your book about common logical fallacies. And I think that many times we think, I'm pretty smart. I'm pretty logical. I know a fallacy when I see one. But what are some fallacies that even smart people tend to fall for pretty often?
Well, I'll tell you, you had in an earlier conversation you and I had, if I'm allowed to break that third wall.
Break it. Let's break it.
You had asked, okay, the subtitle of my book mentions Aristotle and Lincoln and Homer Simpson.
Right.
Why Homer Simpson? And the reason is that I was struggling to write about logical fallacies in a way that wouldn't make every reader just drop the book immediately.
Right.
Reading about logical fallacies is one of the worst forms of torture. I like logic. I'm really interested in it. And even I can't stand to learn about logical fallacies because they're just the human brain being as lame as it is. It comes up with new fallacies every day. You can't summarize them all. So it occurred to me one day, I was procrastinating writing the book and I was looking on the web, and I actually never watched The Simpsons. We didn't have TV when the kids were little. Don't ask me why. I started watching The Simpsons just because I was supposed to be writing and it was something to do. And it occurred to me that the humor in The Simpsons is almost entirely based on logical fallacies. It's on twisting logic around. So here's an example. And it's, by the way, this is a fallacy that's committed all the time by people. Homer offers Lisa a donut. And Lisa being Lisa, if you've watched The Simpsons, you know she's kind of like the good student, the good girl. She says, "No thanks, Dad. Do you have any fruit?" And he looks at the donut, and it's this jelly-filled donut. And he says, "This donut has purple. Purple is a fruit." So when he says purple is a fruit, that's a logical fallacy that you see every time you look at a package of processed food that says fortified on it. A processed food that says fortified is the same as Homer saying purple is a fruit. So this stuff that's horrible for you, it may contain 46 carcinogens, but it contains a gram of protein. Yeah. That is committing that same fallacy where you are associating a quality of one thing with the entirety of another thing.
Yes. And I see it all the time on, if I'm Googling some like health or nutrition topic, I always seem to end up in finding a gallery of foods that are going to help me achieve some outcome because it has some vitamin, like bananas have potassium. It's like, I know that's not really what I'm looking for. So that seems to be that game again and again. It's like, I want an outcome. That outcome is assisted by this vitamin. Some item has this vitamin, and therefore eat this thing and you'll be all set with regard to that outcome.
Exactly.
And it irritates me.
So, I could name others as well. There's one I especially like is post hoc ergo propter hoc, just because I like saying the Latin.
There you go.
That's just confusing correlation with causation. So if something is correlated with something, it happens at the same time, the assumption is that it caused it. And you see this a lot with vaccination resistors. People who believe that vaccinating their 2-year-old children causes autism. And the thing is that the test for autism happens around the same time in a child's age as a particular kind of vaccination regime. And I actually worked with a healthcare company to try to figure out some ways respectfully for pediatricians to talk to vaccination-resistant mothers. And so I learned a lot about what they're doing. And that's in fact what's happening. They're committing this classic fallacy. And what's happening now is that actually the diagnosis for autism is going to be happening sooner in the future. So you're still going to have people who refuse to believe that vaccination does not cause autism, but you're going to get fewer and fewer new converts to that because, the correlation is going to separate from the cause. And that's going to help people a lot. So you can see that, fallacies can kill people. I mean, really important stuff. That being said, most of rhetoric is not about fallacies. Most of rhetoric, in fact, isn't about logic as we learn it in school. It's really about what people believe and expect and whether they like and trust you. So I'll tell you what's even more useful, if I may, than learning formal logic. Just one simple tool. If you want to get all logical, and it's a great way, by the way, for people to shift from an extreme opinion to a more moderate one, insist on defining everything. So when a politician talks about creating jobs, what does he mean by creating jobs? How is a job created exactly?
Yeah.
So now, what does he mean by jobs? So what kind of jobs? Temporary jobs, long-lasting jobs, good-paying jobs, minimum wage jobs, jobs with benefits, those without? When a politician talks about making America safe, ask, what is safety exactly? Safe from what? So how bad is terrorism in America, if that's what you're promising to make us safe from? What exactly is terrorism? Who's committing the terrorism in America right now? And who do you see committing it in the future? What's the crime rate, if that's what you're talking about, compared to when we were kids? And by the way, when I was a kid, the crime rate was way higher than it is now. My parents treated us like savages. They would let us, roam around meeting strangers, partly because I think they had more of us back then, so we were all disposable. But nonetheless, I think the attitude is very different. So defining things is really important. Like, what is safety? What is crime? What's the crime rate? Definitions. Vague terms manipulate you, in other words, a lot more than logical fallacies. Well, we just let people get away with using terms. Here's another term, predator, in regard to anyone who is regarded as a sexual deviant or someone who has somehow hurt other people. We call that person a predator. Now, when we do that, it means that whatever they're doing cannot be stopped. It's incurable. So these people have to be kept apart from the rest of it. It also dehumanizes them.
Right.
You can't treat them in a humane way. Okay, that's fine, but it means probably spending a lot of money that could be saved. And it could mean acting in ways that are unfair and even unconstitutional. And it makes for, just in general, really easy, lazy thinking, which I think lies at the root of most manipulation.
Wow, this is so potent. So now, could you share, maybe, I was having a lot of fun checking out your video on apologies over at argulab.com. Could you share, what are some other kind of handy resources you might point listeners to on argulab.com or within your world of resources that you think could be particularly handy in a professional environment?
So there's ArguLab, but there's also, I have a website, jayheinrichs.com, with other resources that may be more valuable.
Oh, sure. Point us.
So I do. That's jayheinrichs.com, just my name.com. And liking me on Facebook, Jay Heinrichs, Twitter, the usual, at Jay Heinrichs, and so on. You'll find that I do blogs regularly, and they have to do with persuasion that's more of interest to business people. So let's talk. Can we talk apologies just really quickly?
Please, let's do it.
Okay. So I give corporate talks, and the most popular, the most requested talk is one titled "How to Screw Up." I'm a master at screwing up because I do it a lot. One of the things I do, the one video I think you're referring to is the one I did on why politicians are so bad at apologizing, right? Well, one reason is that, and this is related back to Aristotle, who said that the main cause of anger is belittlement. And by belittlement, he meant the sense that you're being treated as less of a person than you feel you deserve. So you know that one of the main causes of malpractice lawsuits against doctors is belittlement. This idea that the doctor didn't treat the patient seriously. That's belittlement. Okay. So it's a cause of a great deal of anger. Now, when someone is angry at a politician for something, who's the first person to demand an apology? It's going to be their opponent. Why? Well, because an apology is an act of self-belittlement. It's making you shrink in front of your audience. Now, politicians don't like to do that. They like to be big. They like to be huge. So, and they also don't want to look powerless because a leader is supposed to seem powerful. So, and this is true in the business world as well. You don't want to look like, oh, I'm less of a person than we all thought I was. That's not very helpful. And even in personal relationships, an apology is never enough because it's really hard, especially for a man, because we're kind of built differently in terms of power or our attitudes toward it. We don't like to shrink in front of other people.
Right.
So as a result, our apologies seem insincere. So sometimes just saying you're sorry is a really good idea. If people expect it, saying you're sorry is fine. But on the other hand, there are more important things that you need to do. And this leads to basic principles of persuasion. First of all, you have to improve your character in front of the other person, whether you're likable and trustworthy. So you can say, here's what I stand for. And I actually strayed from what I stand for. I left the dishes in the sink. I definitely did that. So the first thing you do is you own up to your mistake and tell everything. Don't let those emails dribble out. Don't let them keep finding new things. Tell everything you know immediately. Every PR person will say that in the corporate world. Secondly, say what you stand for. And actually, if you do this right, committing a mistake can actually give you the opportunity to remind people of what you stand for, of what a good person you really are. And what you do is you reposition your mistake, you reframe it to show that this is a way of you're recommitting to your values in the first place. So I left the dishes in the sink. I definitely did that. I'm at fault. You know what a neat person I really am in real life. I strayed from that temporarily. It makes me all the more committed to being a neatnik. And here's how I'm going to fix it in the future. I'm going to set an alarm at the end of every dinner time. And within 10 minutes, every dish has to be out of that sink. Now, obviously, I'm kind of overdoing it here. But in the business world, that kind of thing, own up to your mistake, state your values, show how you may have strayed from them temporarily, show you're putting all hands on deck for a fix, show what the plan is, make that very transparent, and then show how things will be better in the future. And that is whether you screwed up personally, whether it's your company that screwed up. I work with Southwest Airlines. They're one of my clients, and I can tell you they're a master at that. With the world's largest domestic airline, they're going to make some mistakes. Their employees will occasionally commit errors. And Southwest is great. They can come out of mistakes like that, making people think, wow, they really are nice people. They're everything I thought Southwest Airlines was. That's how screwing up can actually enhance your reputation if you do it right. And that's rhetoric at its best.
Well, you tell me, Jay, is there anything else you want to make sure that we cover off before we shift gears and hear about some of your favorite things real quick?
I've already talked too long, Pete.
Oh, but it has been a treat every minute. I'm not even buttering you up or anything. I just like this stuff that much. And this is a slam dunk. So thank you. So let's hear, first of all, is there a favorite quote that you have, something you find inspiring or reference often?
We already said it. John F. Kennedy, ask not. That's just because it's the world's greatest chiasmus, and I use it all the time.
And how about a favorite study or a research or experiment, something that you find yourself citing as you're explaining your principles?
John Gottman, University of Wisconsin, Love Lab, as they called it, where he videotaped married couples and how they fought or argued. And the couples that argued, trying to find a solution to things, their marriages lasted much longer than those couples where they saw every piece of disagreement as proof of what a jerk the other person was. Perfect illustration, the difference between a fight and an argument.
Thank you. And how about a favorite book?
Moby Dick. I know that, I shouldn't say it, but I reread it every year. And here's why. It's one of the funniest books ever written. And it's also one of the most serious books ever written. And for me, it's an inspiration on how to take a really difficult subject like rhetoric and somehow find humor in it so that everybody can enjoy it.
And how about a favorite habit or personal practice?
Every morning, I may be oversharing here. Every morning I get up and I say, make this a glorious day.
And how about any favorite tools, things that you use often and find handy?
I keep a diary. I have since second grade, and I call it lunch. And I've been keeping it ever since second grade. Why do I call it lunch? Because when I was in second grade, my teacher told me that if I wanted to be a writer when I grew up, and I did, I would have to keep a diary and write something down every day. I said, what do I write about? She said, write about yourself. I was in second grade. I had nothing to write about. So I decided, someone else said to me, you are what you eat. So every single day I wrote down bologna sandwich for like 6 years. And then gradually I started filling in some details. And to this day, I keep a diary and I call it lunch.
Oh, that's fun. And how about, is there any particular, we talked about the climax periods and quotable tidbits. Is there any particular nugget you share that does seem to often collect the retweets or the Kindle book highlights?
Switch the tense.
And what would you say is the best place to find you if folks want to learn more and check out your stuff?
I'm hard to miss. So jayheinrichs.com, anything with Jay Heinrichs, search me there. People in business might be interested that Bloomberg Business Week did a profile of me.
Oh, cool.
So If you look up Jay Heinrichs and Bloomberg Business Week, you'll find the profile.
Okay, will do. And do you have a favorite challenge or parting call to action you'd sound forth to folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
I'm going to go back to Switching to the Future. It's such a great experiment. So when you find yourself disagreeing with someone and there's anger in the room, just try this as an experiment. Look at what tense you're in and try changing to the future tense. It's really fun. Try it.
Okay, can do. Jay, this has been so much fun. Thank you. It's a blast. I hope you continue to win your arguments and have fun teaching folks to do the same.
Pete, I really enjoy this. You have a likable and trustworthy character.
Oh, yes. I'm taking that to the bank. Big thanks to Jay for sharing his wisdom with us. And big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsor to check out is Gusto. I love workdays full of creative collaborations and delighting people. I don't love workdays full of paperwork, forms, and compliance-y tasks. That's why I'm such a fan of Gusto. When I talk to my accountant about how to handle payroll stuff, he says Gusto. When I talk to executive director of a small nonprofit how they handle compliance-y stuff, she says Gusto. When I'm getting paid by a bigger organization, I love it when they tell me they use Gusto. Gusto is an online payroll and benefits software built for small businesses. It's all-in-one, remote-friendly, and incredibly easy to use. So you can pay, hire, onboard, and support your team from anywhere. Gusto enables automatic payroll tax filing, simple direct deposits, health benefits, commuter benefits, workers' comp, 401k, and so much more. Gusto makes it simple with options for every budget. Try Gusto today at gusto.com/awesome and get 3 months free when you run your first payroll. That's 3 months of free payroll at gusto.com/awesome. One sponsored checkout is Monarch. I don't enjoy thinking about or fiddling with money, so I love resources that make this quicker and easier. Set yourself up for financial success this year. Monarch is a gorgeous personal finance tool that makes your money life easier. It brings your whole money picture from budgets to accounts and transactions and investments into one super handy dashboard on your phone or laptop. I was such a fan of the old Mint.com and was super bummed when it disappeared. But the good news is that Monarch was founded by a team that includes the original product manager of Mint, and I dare say it's even better. I like the graphical summaries that help me drill down into things quickly and easily and helps me get to the bottom of anything that just seems off or weird or helps me zero in on great opportunities for savings faster. In fact, Monarch helped the average user save over $200 per month after joining. So set yourself up for financial success in 2026 with Monarch, the all-in-one tool that makes proactive money management simple all year long. Use code AWESOME at monarch.com for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with code AWESOME. One sponsor to check out is Keepsake Voices. Heads up, Mother's Day is coming up very soon, May 10th to be precise. You can send her flowers again and she'll say nice things. But I recommend you send her something special she can open and cherish for generations with Keepsake Voices. Here's how it works. When you order, your mother will receive a lovely handwritten card inviting her to speak with an experienced journalist. This interviewer will ask powerful questions to surface treasured stories and things that make your mom special. That conversation is recorded and masterfully crafted by an experienced audio engineer and graphic designer to create a beautifully edited audio and digital book. Your mom gets a special experience reliving memories whenever she likes. Meanwhile, the whole family can enjoy her keepsake voice for centuries. So give mom something special that will last for generations. Go to keepsakevoices.com/Pete to knock off nearly $100. That's a third off their retail price at keepsakevoices.com/Pete. I understand that this episode went longer than average, and that can be frustrating when you're busy and you have a lot of things you've got to handle over the course of the day. But what I think is really most important right now is figuring out how will we use these rhetorical techniques to get folks on board and persuaded with what we're thinking all the faster so that the minutes we invested pay over really many times over. So that was a little bit of a tense shift from the past to the future. So it's a fun little ninja Jedi trick. I find it pretty handy and I hope you do too. So this is fun. And I hope if you haven't already, you do punch the subscribe button so you don't miss folks like our next guest. So hope to catch you then. Peace.
Thanks for listening. To get the most out of the show, we recommend 2 key things. First, check out the extra resources at awesomeatyourjob.com. You can find this episode's transcript and links, as well as the perfect episode for your situation. You can search the full text transcripts of hundreds of episodes or explore episodes tagged by topic and competency covered. Second, subscribe to the podcast and get future episodes automatically. You can subscribe by telling Siri and several other smartphones and speakers, subscribe to the How to Be Awesome at Your Job podcast, or by tapping subscribe in your podcast player of choice. If you'd like some extra help figuring out podcasts and how subscriptions work, visit awesomeatyourjob.com/subscribe for guidance. Hope to catch you on the next episode of How to Be Awesome at Your Job.